Northwest replaced all of the strikers, and some of the strikers and laid off workers crossed the picket line. The strike also failed because none of the other unions supported the picket lines. 26. UAW strike of 1996. Duration March 8th, 1996 to March 22nd, 1996. Number of strikers 136,000. Cumulative days off the job 1,260,000. The United Auto Workers strike ended on March 22nd, 1996 when union leaders agreed to allow General Motors to outsource parts operations in exchange for the company's promise to retain and add jobs at 2 plants. Look at that picture. The U.S. Postal Strike of 1970. The U.S. Postal Strike of 1970, that's what that picture was from. Duration, March 18th, 1970 to March 25th, 1970. Number of strikers, 210,000. Cumulative days off the job, 1,260,000. More than 200,000 employees in 30 cities participated in the U.S. Postal Strike of 1970, comprising a significant share of the nation's 750,000 postal workers. Activists halted mail service in New York, Detroit, and Philadelphia, triggering President Richard Nixon to declare a national emergency. Despite the military's efforts to quell the strikes, a deal was eventually struck, resulting in higher pay and better labor conditions under the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970. 24. General Motors strike. Duration September 16th, 2019 to October 25th, 2019. Number of strikers 46,000. Cumulative days off the job 1,334,000. The work stoppage by the United Auto Workers in the fall of 2019, the longest against General Motors in 49 years, cost GM about $4 billion, according to the automaker. Under terms of the 4-year accord, pay for older workers will increase 6% each year. Hourly workers were to receive an $11,000 signing bonus. The union also thwarted a company demand for workers to pay a greater share of healthcare expenses. 23. Kaiser Aluminum Core Strike. Duration October 1st, 1998 to September 18th, 2000. Number of strikers 3,000. Cumulative days off the job 1,479,000. After several rounds of negotiations, I'm sure that meant rounds, aluminum workers rejected Kaiser's proposal and went on strike on September 30th, 1998. The union cited, among other issues, the company's failure to repay losses incurred during compensation cut agreements made in the 1980s that were made to stave off bankruptcy. After nearly 2 years of numerous failed negotiations and snags, a deal was finally agreed upon on October 1st, 2000. The Boeing Strike of 1995. Duration, October 6, 1995 to December 14th, 1995. Number of strikers, 33,000. Cumulative days off the job, 1,551,000. Machinists and assembly line workers in 1995 won significant wage increases as a result of a strike that lasted over a month. Additionally, while Boeing would continue to increase its practice of contracting jobs overseas, the deal included the coronavirus. Excuse me. That was wrong. The alert screwed me up. Additionally, while Boeing would continue to increase its practices of contracting jobs overseas, the deal included the concession that any worker affected by subcontracting would be entitled to retraining for work elsewhere at the company. 21. Charter Communications Inc. strike. Duration March 28, 2017 to ongoing. Number of strikers, 1,800. Cumulative days off the job, 1,578,600. It's important we support these people that are still striking and support the people that did strike in the past. Charter communications workers started striking on March 2017 to fight changes to their retirement and health care benefits made after Charter acquired Times Warner and rebranded as Spectrum in 2016. Before the coronavirus outbreak hit the U.S., the strike was the longest ongoing strike in the United States. '20. 1934 West Coast Waterfront Strike. Duration May 9th, 1934 to July 17th, 1934. Number of strikers 35,000. Cumulative days off the job 1,750,000. Starting with 12,000 dock workers in the spring of 1934, the West Coast Waterfront Strike included at its peak 35,000 laborers across various marine industries and lasted for 83 days. Though not included in the tally for this particular strike, Teamsters and other unions showing solidarity with the longshoremen brought the total workers on strike during this time to 130,000. The strikers achieved their goals through arbitration in October 1934 after ending the strike in July. 19. United Parcel Service Strike of 1997. Duration August 4th, 1997 to August 21st, 1997. Number of strikers 180,000. Cumulative days off the job 2,032,500. UPS workers represented by the Teamsters went on strike against the delivery service company over pay and benefits. The Teamsters agreed to a 5-year contract after originally asking for a shorter-term deal. UPS agreed to create 10,000 full-time jobs from part-time posts, an increase from its original offer of only 1,000. The workers' $8 an hour base pay was boosted by 50 cents an hour, and the average driver's pay was lifted by $3.10 an hour over the life of the contract. UPS wanted to change the pension plan, but that plan remained in place, a victory for the union. 18. Bituminous Coal Operators Association Strike. Duration May 10th, 1993 to December 14th, 1993. Number of strikers 16,800. Cumulative days off the job 2,203,000. The United Mine Workers of America agreed in December 1993 to end a strike that affected miners in 5 states by extending the contract that had lapsed the previous February. The dispute was over companies with union workers creating non-union subsidiaries and transferring work to them. That issue was deferred. 17. 1913 Patterson Silk Strike. Duration February 25th, 1913 to July 28th, 1913. Number of strikers 23,000. Cumulative days off the job 2,530,000. Workers at silk mills in the New Jersey city that was one of the cradles of the Industrial Revolution. Workers at silk mills in the New Jersey city that was one of the cradles of the Industrial Revolution went on strike over an increase in loom assignments to 4 from 2 that would have reduced the workforce. As the strike dragged on, sometimes turning violent, some strikers returned to work while others who continued to strike were replaced. The strike succeeded in forcing the companies to delay the proposed workplace change. 16. The New York City Tugboats Strike of 1988. Duration February 16th, 1988 to December 20th, 1993. Number of strikers 1,600. Cumulative days off the job 2,895,200. Tugboat operators, whose ranks had been on the decline for many years, staged a failed strike that led to lower wages for many members of their union, the International Organization of Masters, Mates, and Pilots. 15. General Motors Strike. Duration June 5th, 1998 to July 29th, 1988. Number of strikers 152,200. Cumulative days off the job 3,313,000. A bitter strike at General Motors in 1998 ended after the automaker said it would not shutter factories where the workers were on strike and agreed to invest $180 million in new equipment at one of the facilities. The United Auto Workers agreed to work rule changes that would increase production. Caterpillar Strike. 14. Duration June 20th, 1994 to June 20th, 1994 to December 3rd, 1995. Number of strikers 14,000. Cumulative days off the job 4,063,000. Union members at Caterpillar, the workers' largest heavy equipment manufacturer, returned to work on December 1995 after a failed long strike. Workers had gone on strike in June 1994 protesting unfair labor practices. They had been working with a contract since 1991. The new contract placed limits on job security and overtime pay and gave Caterpillar leeway to lay off workers more frequently. 13. Passaic Textile Strike. Duration January 25th, 1926 to March 1st, 1927. Number of strikers 15,000. Cumulative days off the job 4,215,000. The Passaic Textile Strike of 1926 involved more than 15,000 wool and silk workers in the Passaic, New Jersey region. Workers reacted to a 10% pay cut and were galvanized later by police violence against demonstrators. Union demands included, among other items, time and a half pay for overtime, a 40-hour work week, sanitary working conditions, and no discrimination against union members. The strike failed. Of the 9 mills affected, even the few that settled disputes with workers broke their deals, firing many of the workers and rehiring them at lower wages. 12. The 1934 Textile Worker Strike. Duration September 13th, 1934 to September 23rd, 1934. Number of strikers 400,000. Cumulative days off the job 5,600,000. Textile workers went on strike to protest a cut in pay as their work weeks were being reduced. The strike idled the textile industry in North Carolina. The workers, however, lacked the means to continue the struggle. Their cause was also undermined by a glut of textile inventory. In September, President Franklin Roosevelt personally intervened to ask the workers to return to the mills, and they did so. 11. Southern California Supermarket Strike. Duration October 12, 2003 to February 29, 2004. Number of strikers 67,300. Cumulative days off the job 5,718,100. Workers represented by United Food and Commercial Workers went on strike against supermarket company Vons because management wanted to change the health benefits of workers, which under the expiring contract were paid by the company. Soon afterwards, supermarket companies Ralph's and Albertsons, whose contracts with their unions were also terminating, locked out employees. After a nearly 5-month strike, management succeeded in getting workers to pay more for their health care benefits. The 1946 Union of Electrical, Radio, and Machinist Workers Strike. Fox Photos, Getty Images. The 1946 Union of Electrical, Radio, and Machinist Workers Strike. Duration, January 15th, 1946 to March 14th, 1946. Number of strikers, 174,000. Cumulative days off the job, 7,308,000. Accruing 7.3 million days of work stoppage at a time when unions had considerably more power than they do today. The 1946 strike by electrical workers is the 10th largest in U.S. history. Starting in mid-January, after months of negotiations for higher wages, about 174,000 employees of several large electrical manufacturing companies went on strike. The strike was part of several massive organized labor campaigns conducted in 1946. The wave of strikes at the time led to President Harry Truman's Labor Management Relations Act of 1947, also known as the Taft-Hartley Act, which restricted the power of labor unions and is still in force today. The Great Southwest Railroad Strike. Duration, March 1st, 1886 to May 4th, 1886. Number of strikers, 200,000. Cumulative days off the job, 9,400,000. As railroads were rapidly expanding throughout the American West in the late 19th century, railroad workers went on strike in what is known as the Great Southwest Railroad Strike. Workers began protesting the grueling work hours and brutal conditions. The strike against the Union Pacific Railroad and the Missouri Pacific Railroad began after a railroad employee was fired for attending a union meeting in Texas. The job action spread to 4 other states and turned violent. The railroads hired replacement workers, and the strike faltered when other unions failed to support the strikers. You hear that? When other unions failed to support the strikers, it failed. That's important. Piece of history, you need to know that. And practice it going forward. Support, unions especially, support your striking workers. And other unions that are striking here and around the world. 8. Pullman Strike. Duration, May 11th, 1894 to July 20th, 1894. Number of strikers, 260,000. Cumulative days off the job, 13,260,000. Due in part to the fallout from the economic recession between September 1893 and May 1894, railroad car manufacturer Pullman Palace Car Company cut pay by about 25% for workers without reducing living expenses in the company town near Chicago where they lived. When workers presented the problem to company president George M. Pullman, the possibility of starvation added to already poor living conditions, low wages, and a 16 hours workday. They were fired. By midsummer, hundreds of thousands of workers were on strike. A federal court issued injunction and the military were needed to suppress the workers. President Grover Cleveland declared Labor Day a national holiday during the strike. 7. Anthracite Coal Strike of 1902. Duration, May 12, 1902 to October 23rd, 1902. Number of strikers, 147,000. Cumulative days off the job, 15,141,000. What does this show you? As we go back in time, these people were more fervent fighting for their rights, and we need to get back to that place. The Anthracite Coal Strike of 1902 pitted coal miners in Pennsylvania who wanted higher pay and shorter work hours against coal mine companies that claimed their operations were not that profitable. The strike led to the formation of a commission that arbitrated an agreement that included pay increases and reduced work hours. It marked the first time the federal government intervened as a neutral party and not on the side of employers. The job action also boosted the labor movement. I have a feeling that you're not going to see much of that from President Donald Trump. And I'm afraid the same may be true for Joe Biden. Number 6, American Association of Advertising Agencies strike. Duration, May 1st, 2000 to October 30th, 2000. Number of strikers, 135,000. Cumulative days off the job, 17,280,000. Actors belonging to the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists ended their strike in October of 2000. The union defeated an attempt by the American Association of Advertising Agencies and the Association of National Advertisers to discontinue residuals paid to actors for television commercials. Look at that picture. Look at that. United Auto Workers strike of 1945. Number 5. United Auto Workers strike of 1945. Duration, November 21st, 1945 to March 13th, 1946. Number of strikers, 225,500. Cumulative days off the job, 17,363,500. After abiding by a no-strike vow during World War II and deferring wage increase demands, organized labor asked for higher pay once the war ended, and the automobile sector was no exception. The United Auto Workers requested a 30% wage hike in November of 1945. GM countered with a 10% increase. Negotiations reached an impasse, and the laborer began work stoppage. The job action ended when GM said it would give workers a 17.5% pay hike, paid vacation, and overtime pay. Number 4, the Railroad Shop Workers strike. Duration, July 1st, 1922 to September 1st, 1922. Number of strikers, 400,000. Cumulative days off the job, 18 million. In response to a 12% wage cut, about 400,000 railroad workers went on strike on July 1st, 1922. While nearly the largest strike in U.S. history, the workers were ruthlessly broken by various violent measures, including the hiring of 16,000 gunmen, National Guard deployment, and targeted hits by private detectives. The unrest demonstrated in the railroad shop strike led to the passage of the The unrest demonstrated in the railroad shop strike led to the passage of the Railway Labor Act, which provided the right for workers to organize and join unions. Number 3, the Steel Strike of 1919. Duration, September 22nd, 1919 to January 8th, 1920. Number of strikers, 350,000. Cumulative days on the job, 26,600,000. This is a Steel Strike of 1919. Disagreements between labor and management in the steel industry had been mediated by the War Labor Board during World War I. After the war ended, however, workers claimed companies refused to recognize unions. Post-war inflation was also eroding incomes. Steel workers went on strike in September 1919, but the job action was hampered by bad organization as well as ethnic and racial tensions within the steel union. Also, management exploited the public's fear of Bolshevism. That's a form of communism. Strikers crossed picket lines, and the strike ended unsuccessfully for the unionized steel workers. Number 2, the Steel Strike of 1959. Duration, July 15th, 1959 to November 1st, 1959. Number of strikers, 500,000. Cumulative days off the job, 38 million. In mid-July 1959, around 500,000 steelworkers walked off the job in defiance of President Dwight D. Eisenhower's pleas to continue bargaining. The strikers' goal was to amend a clause in their union contract to give management more control over the number of workers assigned to a task, as well as the power to introduce new work rules or machinery that would affect how many employees or hours were needed. The union ended up victorious, although the strike is considered to have led to increases in foreign steel imports, a trade pattern that would ultimately hurt American steelworkers. United Mine Workers of America strike in 1946. There's their picture. Number 1, United Mine Workers of America strike of 1946. Duration, April 1st, 1946 to December 7th, 1946. Number of strikers, 400,000. Cumulative days off the job, 70,400,000. The United Mine Workers of America, under the leadership of legendary union boss John L. Lewis, went on strike in April 1946, seeking a health plan for workers and retirees. As the strike dragged on, President Harry Truman stepped in and placed the mines under the control of the federal government. Eventually, the government forged an agreement with the union that returned control of the mines to companies and provided for raises in pay and improvements in mine safety, as well as establishing a framework for creating a retirement fund. Well, that was a long video for me. I hope you guys stayed tuned because that last article was incredible, telling you the history of the union strikes. So hopefully this video doesn't get cut into two. I've been having a problem with my Samsung device that I record with, my tablet, and I spoke to Samsung and they told me to download some ridiculous, very large update. It was like 1.2 gigabytes. I erased a bunch of stuff. Was on the phone for hours upon hours, multiple times. And they told me to go get it serviced. I finally erased stuff on my own to update it, and I was still having the same problem. So hopefully this doesn't have the same problem. This video, this is just, very important. What union workers and non-union workers do to fight for workers' rights affects us all. When workers have more money, our economy does better. The more money a worker has, the more money they spend, and the more businesses they invest in. The more times they go out to eat, the better they tip for low-wage workers. The more cell phones they get or cell phone plans, the more they can actually advocate and invest in grassroots organizations or better politicians. I mean, the list goes on and on. So we need to support our workers. We need to support them now, and we need to remember our history because history is very important. So I hope this video really informed you and gave you a ton of information, as that was my goal. So please subscribe to Punk Rock Politics on YouTube and go to patreon.com/punkrockpolitics and become a patron today. Thanks very much for joining Punk Rock Politics with John Smith. Have a good one. Stay safe out there. Practice your social distancing. Do everything you can to stay safe. If you're a worker, do everything you can to be safe. Hopefully your employer is doing everything he or she can or they can to keep you safe. If they're not, unite with other workers and strike. Thanks very much. Have a great day, guys. Take care.